All right, so today we're taking a look at some Android apps. I'm actually doing the 30-minute time boxed look at a few repositories. My plan wasn't to keep adopting that format, but today I want to look at a few different Android apps so that I get a sense of what it's like to develop for Android. And if we're going to look at a few different things, it's nice to look at them at the same time so that you have you have the ability to kind of pattern match as you're going. So I had mentioned last one of these coding streams that I had finished processing through the backlog of requests I had taken, and I learned a lot by taking a lot of requests. However, one of the things I learned was that it was just too overwhelming. There are lots of requests, um, and at the rate that I do videos, the backlog can quickly fill up to a year or more's worth of work. And so I need a way to rate limit that. And I've been thinking about how to do that. And so here's the system that I'm setting up going forward. Um, People can still send in requests. Right now, we're collecting them in a. Let me backtrack that. When this video goes public, and hello. So hello, David. Let me get to your question in a second here. Let's show you your question. Um, so when this video goes public, I will open up the taking of requests. I've been telling people that for now, request taking is paused. However, they won't, I'm not going to promise to get to any of them. The requests will be more like suggestions. And the suggestions will be collected. Right now, they're being collected in a Google Sheet, which you can see if you join the Discord. I don't want to put that link publicly because then that kind of invites anyone who stumbles by YouTube to sort of be destructive or whatever their impulse is. And then what we're going to do is what we'll do is a variation of having something like a Patreon tier where you can make requests. But instead of doing something like that, which a lot of channels do, uh, I want to make it so that each request has some um, like fundraising amount associated with it. There will be some amount of donations to the channel. Some of that will go toward the endowment for funding open source projects. Some of that will go toward just keeping the channel running. And I'm just going to take one request a month on the last Friday of the month is the current goal, and the request with the most donations associated with it will be the request that's chosen. And the easiest way for now, while I don't have any infrastructure to track donations, the easiest way to indicate that you want to vote for something is if you're already a Patreon patron or a YouTube channel member, or I think that there's some sort of funding mechanism through Discord. Any of those mechanisms, when you just pop in a chat, ideally on Discord, what you're voting for, and make it clear to me somehow how to match that vote with, like if you're on Patreon and maybe you have a different username, either send me a message on Patreon or send me a message in Discord and let me know what your Patreon username is so I can look that up. And then if you spend, if you're like at $5 a month on Patreon, those $5 will be split among the number of votes you have for that month. So if you vote for, uh, five repos, I'll credit them each to $1. And so that will give a way of indicating how much interest there is in in that repo, and also a way of supporting the channel. So that's that. People have also asked me if I will, since I was processing this backlog, people have asked me if I will jump something over the allow queue jumping, or to do people have asked me if they can just straight up pay me to look at a repo. I'm willing to do that, but I want to set the price so that doesn't happen a lot. And in particular, I don't want to get into a scheme where big companies are trying to get me to do to get eyeballs to their repos. So if you have something that is for whatever reason time sensitive and you want me to look at it, uh, as of now, that will always be public. I'm not going to do like private, like kind of like consulting sessions. But if you want to like jump the queue in that way, then I I'm going to set the starting price to like $512 per video, and then if I start getting too many of them, I'm going to ratchet that up pretty quickly because I feel a bit like that is I'm not unwilling to do it, but it's less about the spirit of what the show is supposed to be about, which is kind of a curated look at open source stuff. And so that's that. That's the announcements. And then David Salamanca was saying, "I love your content. Hey, thank you. That means a lot. How do I come up with these repos? I mean, how do you know what repos are open source so you can get to read their code?" So those are good questions. To link that up to what I was just saying, for a while I was doing requests, and the requests kind of come in a couple of different varieties. Some people, like the YouTube user LC, uh, requested things that were kind of um, like here, this channel is a cool idea. Let's explore these different open source projects like Grub or I think KVM, that sort of thing. And then there were also people who were like, I have to contribute to this repo. Could you do one on that? So those are kind of two different kinds of requests I've gotten. But a lot of the stuff that I've done where it wasn't a request, it was just kind of my wanting to look at it, has been either I'm a user of that open source thing, or it's a well-known project, or uh, or it's about some topic that I want to learn about. And how do I know if it's open source? Um, in some cases, you can just go to GitHub and search for a thing. But I also have been using open source software for years, so I have a sense of what a lot of the open source stuff is. In some cases, there are these kind of gray areas where some project has source available, but you're not allowed to modify it and stuff like that. And it's not infrequently you'll see somebody, uh, say, "Oh, I'm super into this app," and it's not really clear if it's open source or not. But if you do some digging, you can find the source code. So that sort of stuff. Yes, LC, I know that. I know those were ideas for the and not requests. And you said that before. But I took them as requests, not because that's what you were because that's not because that's what you were up to, but because that was the mode I was in. And that was like that was really early days. And I guess I wanted to clarify that I think you really saw what I was what I was going for, and you and so I took that in a very um, I took them, I guess, stronger than you intended them intentionally. I didn't mean to call you out as having made a bunch of requests, and I hope that I didn't do that. I was trying not to say that, but but you did recommend a lot of things that I think were really good, and I think we basically did almost all of them because they're really good ideas, and those are and I think they've expanded my sense of how a lot of the open source world works, how a lot of computing works, and that sort of thing. So that's been good. All right, so let's move on to the Android apps. So first of all, where's my OBS here? Android. I have done a little bit of Android development in several years ago, and it was when I was just starting out, and I don't know, and I wasn't any good at it. And things have changed a lot since then. So I'm trying to get a sense of how that's going to work. I'm going to blank this screen right here so I can log into Gemini without accidentally showing anything. All right, so let's move on to these apps. Okay, so David's saying some more stuff. Give me a second to read this. Yeah, that is true. So, David's saying that sometimes they're trying to learn stuff, but they can't get repos about the things they're learning. Like, for example, REST APIs or React projects. Okay, so that's true. It's super hard to, I guess this is a discoverability problem. It's super hard to know what you want to look for and find that as an open source project in a way that's meaningful that you can learn from. What I'm doing is much easier, which is that I'm usually aware of the projects, or somebody will like ArduPilot and PX4 are two examples where I would have had no idea how to find open source projects that people cared about that did like control theory, vehicle autopilot stuff. But people recommended those, and so I was able to learn about that. So what you're describing is hard, and I'm kind of there right now for Flutter apps. I'd like to learn Flutter. I don't know what the good open source Android Flutter apps are, if there really are any. So I think you just have to kind of take what you can get. You can do GitHub searches for like projects that import React, for example. And there are lots and lots of REST APIs. So for that, I would maybe just pick any big open source project that has a web component and look at how they do things. I think that'll be at least able to get you started. All right. So my coding and code reading setups have diverged, and now I have to kind of somehow find a balance between the two. So I may have to like tweak things as I'm going. All right. So where was I starting? Anki Droid. Okay, so we're doing Anki Droid, which is, I don't know if you know, a lot of you I'm sure are familiar with Anki, which is essentially a flashcard app that lets you have there's like, it has support for like sound and media and whatever, and it also has, you can like download pre-made flashcards. So if you want to learn like how to add fractions together, I'm sure there's some fraction adding flashcard pack. And then Anki Droid is just the Android client for Anki. So spaced, what is it? Spaced repetition is the technical term that these flashcard folks are into. Spaced repetition is an evidence-based learning technique that is usually performed with flashcards. Newly introduced and more difficult flashcards are shown more frequently, while older and less difficult flashcards are shown less frequently in order to exploit the psychological spacing effect. So the idea here is mainly it's much easier to learn things with repeated repetitions, and there are like learning experiments with rats and with humans memorizing arbitrary lists of things, and they find out that, you know, if you repeat it at this frequency, then you're less likely to forget. And Anki is used a lot for like studying for tests, preparing for the med school exam, whose name I forget, preparing for the GRE, that sort of stuff. But I think there's also a lot of people who use it for what's it called? Just life, just having like a good memory. All right, so Anki Droid is one. I guess I might as well just open these up so I don't have to keep going back here. Wallabag Android is another. I looked at the Wallabag source code before. Wallabag is a web-based service that lets you bookmark things and read them later. The Wallabag Android app, which I don't think I've looked at least I hope not. Let me double check this. And yeah. I'm just scrubbing here through the Wallabag video on the other screen. Oh, this is back when I was using SourceGraph. Oh, I did look at the Android app a little bit. So maybe we might skip Wallabag unless people really want to see it again. And what else was it? The Jellyfin client, which is called Finamp. Jellyfin is like a it's like a music and movie streaming service. There's a more famous streaming app, piracy. It's popular in the piracy community. Streaming server. I'm forgetting its name. I'm not saying Jellyfin is for piracy, but this other thing that I'm trying to think of. Let's try adding Reddit, because I think that sometimes people sometimes hang out at Reddit. Navidro. Plex. Yeah. So I think it's similar in spirit to Plex. Is it this one? Are they based in Troy, Michigan? Let's try Plex Media. It's kind of like this. If you know Plex, I'm sure Jellyfin has a cool page too. Free software, media system. You can stream your movies and shows and stuff. But we're going to look at the Android client. So that's for like, if you have your music or movies on a network attached storage and you want to listen to some of your tunes, yeah, you could use Finamp as kind of like a free version of Spotify, I guess, a little bit. And the last one we're going to look at, I think the last one. Let me grab this. Yeah, Spotkin front end. You're welcome, David. So Spotkin front end is an app made by Rivers Cuomo of the band Weezer. And he's been doing projects in like Flutter. And this is one of them. I imagine it's mostly like relatively simple compared to something like Finamp or Anki Droid that have been around for a while that have a lot of features. But I think it's worth checking out. Okay. So I guess I'm going to skip. No, I will look at Anki Droid. I want to look at the maybe the synchronization code, which I don't think I looked at before. Maybe I looked at the text-to-speech stuff more before. But at any rate, let's do that. And maybe, why don't we start with that? And since we've looked at it before, let's do like 15 minutes instead of half an hour. Okay. We're taking a look at some Android apps. In this video, we are looking at the Wallabag Android app. We've looked at the Wallabag source code in another video, and we also looked at parts of the Android app. This will just be a short video trying to remind myself what they were up to and maybe looking at different parts of the Android app that we hadn't looked at before. I believe the first time around, I was mainly looking at text-to-speech, although I haven't rewatched the video. I will rewatch it after this now that I realize I looked at Android, but I haven't rewatched it yet. And of course, you should watch it too. And this is Ants Are Everywhere, and we're reading source code. Okay, so I just explained to people watching the live stream, but I'm going to cut that part out when I post this video. Wallabag is a bookmarking app. I'm using it here. I can open a page like Kraken. I don't remember if it's an E. I think it's an E, and I can use the Firefox keyboard shortcut to save it to my Wallabag. And then if I were to log into Wallabag, I would see this Wikipedia article here. And then if I'm going to go like cut the grass or drive to pick up my kids or whatever, I can listen to the Kraken article in an audio version. So I don't have to read it. I spend a lot of time in front of screens doing work. So it's nice to be able to have sources of content that are audio based. But eventually you exhaust all of the podcasts and you get tired of hearing about Squarespace. So it's nice to have other things that you can do. Okay, so Android has a pretty straightforwardish setup, I think. So in the root directory, there's Gradle stuff. Gradle is, I think, technically a build system. It's usually, when I was doing it, it was written in Groovy, which is a Python-like language on the JVM. I'm told recently that you can write it in Kotlin. Apparently, you can also write Gradle stuff in Java as well, and Scala. And it's build automation. I never really cared for it myself, but that's Gradle. We have a folder for icons, a README folder. I don't think that's like standard Android stuff. I think that maybe they just put READMEs in there. And then an app directory, which has a source directory with some more Gradle stuff and some debug, I guess, resources and some release resources, and then main. That's the standard Android stuff. And then this is also standard. I think there's an assets directory in main and a res, which I believe is resources, right? Yeah, these are like icons and stuff. And then this is Java. So we have a bunch of mostly empty directories like fr, galapo, apps, and posh, which is, I believe, just French for pocket. Pocket is the read it later app that's built into Mozilla Firefox that I disable every time I install Firefox. Okay. And so text-to-speech and UI, I think, is probably mostly what I focused on before. It might be interesting to look at service, but I think I mainly want to look at data. And they're using data access objects. I'm peeking in the other window here because I decided I do kind of want to see what I looked at before. But I can't really tell what file I'm looking at. All right. At any rate. So in software, a data access object, or DAO, is a pattern that provides an abstract interface to some type of database or other persistence mechanism. By mapping application calls to the persistence layer, the DAO provides data operations without exposing database details. So it's a database abstraction. There's lots of them. And I don't know if this. So let's see, Android. What I want to know is Android still suggesting this pattern? Accessing data using Room DAOs. When you use the Room persistence library, you store your app's data. To store your app's data, you interact with the stored data by defining data access objects, or DAOs. Each DAO includes methods that offer abstract access to your app's database. At compile time, Room automatically generates implementations of the DAOs that you define. Okay. So I forget exactly how this is done. We'll see, I think, an example. They probably are using Room, but I'm not sure. But basically, it's maybe similar in spirit to forms. object relation managers, mappers. I don't remember what the M stands for, but in a lot of cases, you essentially want to persist your application data to disk, and you want to do that in an efficient way. So you want to use a database, but you've already written your application logic, and that's going to change over time. And so it's nice to have some sort of tooling that makes it easier to focus on just the application side and have the database side take care of itself. You could, in theory, just focus on the database side and have like automatically generate the application level like classes and stuff. Conceptually, that's a little bit how protobuf works. Maybe internally at Google, the databases, you can kind of describe them as storing protos, similarly to how you might store JSON objects outside of Google. And the protos also generate the application level code for manipulating objects and stuff. All right, so it seems like this is up-to-date documentation. It seems like Android is still okay with you using DAOs. They do change stuff like all the time. Why do we need to use a DAO and repository in the same something or other? This is from 2 years ago. I'm working on a path project to learn Android deeply. What is a path project? Is this a concept in learning? I don't know. So it says Room is a layer of the SQLite database. I'm pretty sure we've looked at the SQLite code. Let me verify this. And so Room is a layer of the SQLite. DAO forms the main component of the Room persistence layer. We use queries to perform CRUD operations. On the other hand, a repository class is something that abstracts access to multiple databases. Okay, yes, we have looked at SQLite. And so let me ask maybe ChatGPT. I'll say, tell me about the main differences between ORM and DAO with respect to databases. ChatGPT is just going to hang. So while it's looking at that, let's go back to the code. Okay, so we have a bunch of DAO objects. These are just, I think, just going to be like one object maybe per table or per yeah, it must be per table, right? And then we have a bunch of things like list types, list adapters. Maybe this is for taking so this is just the data directory. This is not necessarily database, but perhaps this is for taking the data and putting it in a list, like a list of articles. We also have a queue helper, which I am going to look at. Usually I don't look at helpers, but kind of curious to see what they're doing. We have settings, a storage helper. Settings, I think Android provides a special, maybe like a key value store for saving setting data that is not at the database level. It's maybe for storing things like your username. I don't know how password storage works. I don't remember. Presumably that gets protected by the secure enclave. Yeah, so ChatGPT is literally just going to say, try again in all caps. Okay, so what? Here's the DAO stuff. We have article DAO, article tags, join DAO, DAO master, DAO session, FTS DAO. What is FTS? And queue item DAO. It just occurs to me looking at this that I don't know how you store like a queue, like a reading list in a database. I don't think that's obvious. You could, for example, store next to each item the order of the item. Like if your first article is about Kraken, you could store a 1 for Kraken. And if your next article is about Android. You could store 2 for Android. But that doesn't really work because you're going to want to like swap 2 things. And then when you swap them, you're going to have to update the identifiers of everything that comes after either of them. You could try to do maybe like a linked list sort of approach, but I don't know how you store a linked list in a database. So the key differences between ORM and DAO. ORM provides a higher level of abstraction, automating much of the interaction with the database, and DAO is lower level. I think that's really the main thing, is that you are actually like modeling the database and you have SQL statements in your code. DAO has full control over the queries, and so on and so forth. So what are the disadvantages? Performance overhead for ORM, complex queries for ORM, and the point of DAO is encapsulates all access to the data store and provides an abstract interface to the underlying database. I don't know how this is really different from just having a SQL by just accessing SQLite. It may be a relatively thin layer. In fact, we could maybe look at Room at some point if we wanted to. Okay, so back to the code. So here's queue helper. No, before we get to queue helper, let's look at a few of these DAOs. Let's look at article DAO. So importing a bunch of stuff, including database cursor, which is an Android library, a Android SQLite library as well, which has a SQLite. We're importing SQLite statement, and we're importing abstract DAO, whatever that is. I guess this green robot.green DAO is some third-party library that I guess these developers like. That has something like an abstract DAO property, a DAO config, etc., etc. This code was generated. Edit with caution. Okay, so this is generated code. Hello, Ant. Hello, Justin. Okay, so I wasn't realizing that this is generated. Somewhere we should see the stuff that generates it, but we see what? A bunch of properties. These look like database tables. We have the ID, the article ID, title, domain, URL, etc., etc. And then we have this create table, which just is calling db exec SQL with a SQL statement that is, we're interpolating with strings. Yeah. And whatever this bind value is. So bind values is going to take a database statement and an article entity, I guess, and do binding. Hopefully that's like actual binding and not just string substitution. But this is very databasey. And this is the generated code, and it's clean. You can see what all the stuff is doing. Here's a DAO master. Is this generated code? This code was generated. Edit with caution. So DAO master extends abstract DAO master. And it's just going to, guess, like essentially loop over the stuff. So we have this create all tables, which is going to, it knows because it's generated what all of the DAOs are at the time of generation. And it's going to call all of their create tables methods. And if you want to drop all tables, you can drop all the table methods, etc. And then we've got this register DAO class thing. Okay. DAO session, I'm going to guess, is also generated. Okay, it is. Presumably that's for database sessions. What is this FTS thing? This I don't think is generated. At least there's no comment that I see. FTS, trigger names. FTS, I'm not sure yet. But we have a bunch of triggers like the article added insert FTS, blah, blah, blah. I guess I just scrolled past it, so. Using FTS 4. FTS ICU tokenizer enabled. I'm not sure, but we're just going to plow along. I kind of want to know now, where's the Android stuff? So Android DAO examples. I want to see if there's anything interesting to look at from the code that causes the DAO to be generated. right, let's look at the Java code. So we have some interface, user DAO, and we have function insert all. It's going to take a user of, I forget the name for this thing, but it'll take multiple users. I guess you can put them in comma separated, like very variable number of arguments. We have delete of user, and these annotations, I guess, essentially tell Room which SQL query to generate. And if you know that you're supposed to delete a user object, then it's pretty easy to figure out what code you're supposed to write. Especially if you control all of the SQL queries, which I think is the idea that DAO does. Somewhere we should define what a user is, though, right? I guess users may be just like a Java type somewhere. Okay. Actually, let's undo that. And we'll look for insert. I don't know how to search for an @ sign in GitHub. What if I escape the @ sign? What if I just search for insert? I don't really see it, but that's not the end of the world. We'll move this out of the way for a second. Okay, so let's look at some of the other stuff. The Q item DAO. We should actually be able to see maybe Q item. Yeah, here we go. DAO entities. So we have an @ entity, which is mapped to the table Q item, and some enum called action, I think. And the actions are add link, article delete, article changed, article tags delete. So these are essentially events or actions that will store it maybe, I guess, in the database as a record of the intent. And then there should be some service that that ensures that intent is acted upon. We're over 15 minutes, but I'm actually just going to keep going because I'm enjoying and learning a little bit here. We also have this article change type. You can archive the article, favorite it, I guess maybe change its title, change its tags. I guess you can't like refresh the article. Although I know you can in the app. I don't know how that's handled, but I guess it's not an article change type. And so I guess a queue item doesn't seem to have anything to do with queues other than it's like you're reading queue. I mean, it's an item in the queue. I don't think that's necessarily, well, we'll see. So queue item is its own thing. Where are we now? We are still in the public class queue item. I guess this is like a constructor or a converter. Where was I? Here. I guess this is a constructor. It has a queue item is a thing that has an ID, a queue number, an action, an article ID, a local article ID, and two essentially extra strings for really for, I assume, for flexibility, being able to extend the functionality by like passing things like keys and values for stuff that's not fully implemented in the database or whatever. All right, so I don't know what I guess the ID is the ID of the queue item. I don't know what the queue number is. Maybe this is the order or the priority or something along those lines. The action, I guess every queue item has an action. So I guess this is not for just like storing articles in a queue. I guess this is storing actions to be taken on articles. We have this thing that's called specific item. I don't know if that's worth looking at. We have queue helper. I think we did open queue helper. We have settings activity DAO session. Okay, so let's move along. We'll come back to queue because that is really to me, one of the mysteries of an app like this is what's the right way to think about putting a queue in a database. This is DB connection. This is just going to be a database connection. We're using, I think, SQLite, although we communicate with the Wallabag backend to do stuff, and there's a database on the back end, but I don't think we have like write or read access to that database. And we just have some session. I guess even though the database is just local on disk, you need some session management so that different threads and stuff can be aware that the database is open and whatnot. Here's DB utils. We just have run in non-exclusive TX. So you give it the DAO session, runnable, which is a consumer of DAO session. I guess it's a something you can execute that depends on a DAO session, perhaps. And then we have the SQLite database, which we're going to get by. Oh, no, this is not part of the argument. This is just the next line. But we're going to get the SQLite database by just calling session get database and get raw database. So get database must be some abstraction of the raw SQL pointer or whatever. It's Java, so it's not literally pointers, but whatever they're called in Java, some reference you can follow to get to the SQLite database. And then we're going to call this begin transaction non-exclusive and with the try finally block, which is maybe a little bit weird because I don't know what happens with the exception. If there's an exception, I assume you want to roll back the transaction. Maybe that happens automatically. But I guess end transaction will roll it back perhaps if set transaction successful never is called. Something along those lines. Storage helper. We have things like copy file result. This is, I guess, just like error semantics for copying stuff. Okay, I'm guessing means copy was okay. Source does not exist. Source cannot read source, etc., etc. So this is. I'm surprised there's not some better, well-known solution for this, but this is maybe for logging and stuff like that. And we have read raw string, giving it an int. Maybe the int is the string identifier. We call read raw string unsafe. On the ID. Yeah, okay, so given the ID, we'll do what? So we'll call app.get instance.get resources. And on resources, we'll try to open raw resource ID. So that's this ID is like an Android ID, and this is just wrapping like the Android functionality, I guess. We have an external storage path, which is the DB path. I don't know what external means. This might mean that you can save it on an SD card or something outside of the app directory, the app sandbox. And we have things like whether the path is writable, copying files. Writing a file copying routine is something I would strongly prefer not to do because people have been doing it since like the 1960s and have the existing libraries must catch all of even the craziest edge cases. So I feel like you can't really compete with that kind of robustness. All right, so here's settings.java. I think that settings just get stored. Yeah, you have some app get settings. If it's first run, like this is the first time we're running the app, then we're going to set first run false, I guess, because we've considered ourselves already run. And we're going to start the run wizard, the connection wizard activity. That will probably do things like it'll ask you for what's the URL of your Wallabag instance. Is like Wallabag is self-hostable, so you can put that there. Enable component. I don't know what this is doing. Something about package managers, components. I don't know what a component is. We can initialize preferences. So one thing I've noticed about the Wallabag app, and mine's probably a little bit out of date by about a year or so. I don't know how fast development happens. But every time I open the app, there's some chance that the text-to-speech voices have changed between the Google voices and the Samsung voices. I don't know why that is, but somewhere I think there's probably a setting that's not being either persisted correctly, or they're selecting maybe the text-to-speech voices via an index into some list, and maybe that list doesn't have a static structure. Maybe it can change depending on conditions on the phone. All right, and so I'll close that down. This is a queue helper, which I haven't figured out yet if this queue is just the queue of actions to take on articles, or if it's also the like reading list order. And then there's service. Let's look quickly at service. We have action request, action result. Let's pull this out into its own thing, maybe. Alarm helper, alarm receiver, boot receiver, callable parameterized adapter, main service, operations helper. So, okay, so these are like maybe like types or data structures. Parsable is a thing in Android. I forget what it is. It's for parsing some sort of object. We have task service, Wallabag job service. So this is some implementation of like background jobs. Workers. Okay, we have like article as file downloader, article image loader, images fetcher, update worker, updater, offline changes, synchronization. So this is going to be things like synchronization. So if you add one thing I've noticed is if I'm like in the subway in New York and I don't have cell phone connection, I can add a file. I can add a URL to Wallabag Android, and it will not show up on my reading list there. But once I get network connectivity, I guess in the background somewhere, it will have told the server about the article, and the server will somehow indicate to the Android app that it should now display the article in the reading list. And we're getting facts about Henry Ford from David Salamanca. Did you know that Henry Ford did with the motor what you are teaching here at the code? I did not. He would just take it apart, analyze it, read some concepts about it to learn how to make it. That's cool. I didn't know that about him. It took approximately 12 years to come up with the first boogie. Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate that. Late. What time? I'm just curious, Elsie. What time is it near you? Is that what you mean by late? Oh, or maybe you're like catching up to the stuff that I said before. So I'm reading what Elsie is saying. It's on the screen and is information dense. So maybe I won't read it entirely out loud. Let me get a sense of what it is, and I can maybe paraphrase stuff. So DAOs are mostly defined by wrapping SQL in code level operations, typically one-to-one correspondence between the database objects. Yeah, okay. Repositories from the DDD. Okay, so this is when I think I was looking at that Stack Overflow question. No, I feel like I'm looking at somebody when I'm looking at their chat, but I'm looking away from my camera. Maybe the effect is lost. Maybe you need a camera that follows where the chat is. The repositories are less granular. They'd be at the so-called aggregate root levels, like line item bunch with an invoice. Okay, so some group of databases is, I think, the way that maybe they Stack Overflow. ORM is just a piece of middleware to handle not having to write anything like the above manually. Okay, so it's at a higher level up. Cool. Thanks. Watching a portfolio amount. Yep. You know what? The stock market is going crazy. By going crazy, I mean in sharp decline. Is that what you mean by portfolio? Because if so, it's true. What is like one of the trading view maybe? One of these people will show me a free chart. Yeah. Apple. It tells me a lot about who you think your clientele are. Okay. Yeah. I was slightly long this morning, but now I am short. I think the outlook has changed. We're getting more information about, like, I think Amazon released some stuff about consumers not being too I forget what their wording was, but basically the shopping data is aligned with some of the other economic data. That suggests to me that this is going to last longer than just a few days or whatever. All right, that's stock markets are everywhere. Okay, so workers. So let's article update worker. I don't know what really these things are doing. So they have some interface, presumably the base network worker. It's going to be some worker that needs network. It's got this update method. It doesn't seem to be overriding anything. So I guess it's not part of any interface. And I guess in Java, I think you say implements blah to say that it implements an interface as opposed to extends. So update takes an action request. Action request, I think, is general. I think that probably an interface that all actions implement. And then from the action request, we're going to call new update article started event on the action request and get an update articles started event. And we'll post sticky event. Post sticky event. I don't know what that means, but we'll look that up. And then we'll call update articles on the action request, not the event, and get a result. And if that fails, I have no idea what we'll do, but if it, either way, I guess we'll do nothing if it fails. But either way, we're going to, in this finally block, remove the sticky event, the start event. And if the result is null, I guess that means it failed for some reason. We're going to set a new action result. The error type is unknown. It seems like maybe there could be an except block that, or perhaps we could get information from the result, but at any rate, we just say we don't know what the error is. And then we post event, which is not sticky, and the event is update articles finished event action request result. That will record somehow in some database, maybe just the local database, that this thing failed. And update articles is the real thing that's doing work. And here's its implementation. It takes an action request and gets the update type. I'm not sure what the update type is. We're going to log some stuff. And create a new action result, which we set to null. If network is available, then we're going to get the settings. I don't know if that requires the network. And we're going to create a new article update listener, which has the following implementation. It's got an on progress callback, which we will post the event that there's been some progress, passing in the current progress. And we've got this on success callback. And when the success has been succeeded, then we set the latest updated timestamp. This is, I guess, setting the database. I think this is setting on the database when we last updated the article, the last update run timestamp, will be the current time in milliseconds. I don't know where we got this latest updated. Oh, okay, that's from this function. And then we set first sync done to true. Okay. And again, there's no like failure callback, I guess. And then we get an article updater, which takes in the DAO session and the Wallabag service. That gives us a variable called updater. And then we create an event, or we set the event rather, to the result of updater.update with the update type and some information. And here we have some error handling. If there's an unsuccessful response exception or an IO exception, then we call process exceptions, passing in E with the update articles. I think this is maybe a form of logging. We call R update of R. And then otherwise, if we just have any other exception, we do some error stuff. All right, so what did I want to know? I want to know what post sticky event is. It's an event helper. Event processor. You deleted some stuff. Okay. We have create event bus. Event bus.builder. Send. So there's some event bus. What? It's the green robot event bus. I don't know if this is like the developers of the app, if this is if they're somehow affiliated. Open source libraries to make apps and app development fast and fun. Less boilerplate and managing infrastructure code. Event bus. Number 1, publish, subscribe, event bus. Optimized for Android. And greened out. Okay, so maybe this is a well-known org. Event bus. So if I just search for event bus Android, I get a link to the green robot people. And I'll say, I need class Gemini and event bus for my Android app. What are my options? Optinos. An event bus is a powerful tool. Some popular sticky events, event priorities, auto, created by Square, but now deprecated. Some alternatives are XJava, live data and view model, custom event bus. I'll ask who makes the event bus. So I guess Green Robot, they seem to be in the event bus. To draw a picture of an event bus. Before you draw, list some kinds of events that would make a good picture. I meant to type more, but I accidentally hit return. It's pretty good. This one has lots of penguins, it looks like. I'll say I like the second picture of the yellow double-decker bus. But add more penguins. Also describe what events the penguins are going to, and they'll happen in the background. Okay, so we have this event bus thing. This is from this. They seem to be relying on this green robot library, which is cool. I don't know what makes an event sticky. Man, let's just find out. We can try green robot sticky events. Some events carry information that is of interest after the event is posted. For example, an event signals that some initialization is complete. Or if you have some sensor. Oh, okay. So I guess maybe. I guess events are meant to be like temporary for the most part. And I guess sticky events stick around in some sense. But where are the events stored? Are they stored in the database? Let's look up DAO. I don't know. I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to go too far afield there. All right. So there's some event bus. They have this article updater logic. And this is offline changes synchronizer. This is maybe the thing that I was mentioning that happens when you're like in the subway. You have synchronize with some action request. Sync queue started. Sync offline queue is network available. We get the database stuff, the queue helper. We have some counter. The total number is the queue size. And we are going to, for each item, get the article ID. Can tolerate not found is set to true. We're going to, okay, so if the article is changed, we're going to try to sync article change, sync delete tags from article, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess maybe the way that we're doing is that instead of syncing the database, we have, or maybe just using the API, the REST API or something of the server to keep the databases in sync. Let's look at just an arbitrary one, sync add annotation to article. You have some item, add or update annotation item, and then the article ID. And it may throw a configuration exception or an unsuccessful response or an IO exceptions. And we get the DAO session. And we use a query to get the annotation. If it's null, that's an error. And then we have this list. Wallabag.api wrapper.models.annotation.range. Ranges is a new array list that is the same size as the annotation ranges that I think we got from the DAO, from the SQLite database on the mobile app, on the device. And then for each annotation range that's on the device, we are going to create this, whatever this API wrapper business is. This is, I guess, some wrapper probably for the REST API for the Wallabag web server. And we're just like setting the API range. We're just setting the information from the Java stuff that we had stored on the device's SQLite, and then we'll call ranges.add API range. And that's creating one API range for each range, I guess, we have on disk. And then we have this, we're getting from the Wallabag service, we're going to call add annotation, blah, 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 and we get a remote annotation. I think that this is probably the thing that's calling the server, and that's why we get a remote annotation. And if it's null, then we failed to properly tell the server about our annotation, I think. Otherwise, on annotation, which is the one we got from the DAO, we set its annotation ID to the remote ID and update it. I don't know if it didn't have an ID before or if it just had a... Maybe that's what the local ID, it has a local annotation ID. And I'm curious if that's the key. What's it called? The primary key? Okay, so now I'm getting a sense of how their stuff works. And then the last thing I want to know is about playlists or reading lists. I'm guessing that's related to the queue stuff. I have a bunch of queue stuff open. This is operations workers. I'm assuming that's mainly going to be just executing deleted article sweeper. This may be just synchronizing, but I'm guessing if you've deleted articles, maybe it marks them as soft deleted, like it says to delete to true, and then eventually you reclaim that disk space or something. Image fetcher, this is going to fetch stuff. I'm curious whether this fetches from the original image URL or if the Wallabag server serves these images up to you. We've got more sticky event stuff. Fetch images. We have some stuff about external storage. We're going to get the article DAO from the DAO session. And we have a query builder. Ordering. We're only looking at things where the images are not downloaded. So we have some entry in the database when we preserve the article to the database locally, I guess on the device, we probably always do that with no images downloaded and say that images downloaded is false. And then this probably periodically runs and downloads images and then sets the images downloaded to true. Once that's done, I'm guessing how it's done. And we do that by order of article ID, which is probably basically the order that you added the articles. And we create a new article changed event. We have some list of processed articles and changed articles. We set DB query size to 50. And I guess we do only 50 articles at a time, which seems like a lot if you're downloading images on your phone. Because often phones, my phone is often connected to my Wi-Fi if I'm in a building. But it's also, it's a fancy phone, but downloading images for 50 articles at a time seems like a lot of work for it to do. So it's possible that this is something that could be tuned or optimized. I don't know. I haven't noticed it using a lot of battery or anything like that. So, and then while true, in an infinite loop, we are going to get the article list. If it's empty, we will have some errors. And for all of the articles in the article list, we're going to say that the fetch image event is in progress. We're going to get the article's content. So that should be like the HTML of the article. And make sure content's not null. Append preview picture URL to content to fetch it to should probably be handled separately. So we're going to ask if the article has a preview picture URL. And if it doesn't, we're going to create one. Wait, what? If text utils is empty. I don't know what we're doing here because isn't this empty? So what is it doing when we add it to? I'm not sure. Something's going on here. Maybe the second time you call it, something more interesting happens. And then we have this image cache thing. And we're going to call cache images on the article ID as a long. I guess cache images wants a long. And the content. And then, or rather, if that cache lookup, I guess, succeeds, then we'll add changed articles to get article ID. Otherwise, we'll add processed articles. We'll add the article to process article. Okay. But okay, and then we iterate over the process articles. And if we're done here, then we set images downloaded to true. And I'm guessing that maybe the cache images is the thing that actually downloads them. There's no comment, but we're going to call find image URLs in HTML. So this is just going to do some kind of beautiful soup style stuff. I forget what the Java one's called, like JSoup or something along those lines. Now we'll get the image URLs. And I'm guessing these probably are the real URLs. Like if it's a Wikipedia article, I'm guessing this is wikipedia.org or com/blah, blah, blah, as opposed to the Wallabag URL, although I'm not positive. And then we get the article cache path, which is, I guess, the path on disk. We set downloaded something to false. And then for each of the URLs, if it starts with Wallabag relative URL, so I guess that's the stuff on the Wallabag, then we're going to try to get it from Wallabag, I suppose. Otherwise, we're going to parse the image URL if it's null, blah, 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 and then download image to cache. We're going to call download image to cache. So it seems like the images might come from Wallabag sometimes. I still am getting the impression that they might come from not Wallabag as well. And then eventually we're using OKHTTP to make although we're connecting to Wallabag. Maybe. I don't know if Wallabag connection is necessarily connecting to Wallabag. All right, I want to be done with this and move on to another repo, but I still want to know about playlists. So let me just ask the AIs. Oh, here we go. Look, this is looking good. I'll say I have an app that stores music playlists that can be edited. What is a good way to persist the playlist? How about, instead of what is a good way, how about describe some common ways to store playlists in a relational database? What are their trade-offs? All right, so it'll do that in the background. And since I mentioned playlists, let's move on to Jellyfin, or rather Finamp. So ChatGPT is saying there's a playlist table, which has a playlist ID, playlist name, user ID. Advantages, simple, easy to understand. Disadvantages, requires joining tables to get complete playlist details. Embedded song lists in playlist table. You may have you could have like a JSON or CSV, what is it, like M3U file format, basically embed an M3U. Style thing. Use a junction table with extra metadata. Normalized song metadata in separate playlist context. Huh. Let's ask the same thing to Gemini. All right. So here's Finamp. We're looking at Android apps. In this video, we're taking a look at Finamp, an Android client for Jellyfin, which is a media library that you could run self-hosted on a network attached server or whatever. your laptop, some old workstation you have lying around. It looks like this. It seems to have a pretty good sense of branding, and it's based on Android. I don't know what. Oh, we do have iOS and Flutter. And in fact, I am going to not do this yet because I want to do the 2 Flutter ones last. So let me look at Anki Droid, and then we'll move. Then we'll move to Finamp. I guess I closed Anki. Let's try this again. So Gemini's telling me about playlists. There's a 3-table approach. The playlist stored information about each playlist, et cetera, trade-offs, flexibility, blah, blah, blah. Embedded array of JSON, simplicity normalized with additional columns. Choosing the right approach, additional considerations, order. If the songs order within a playlist is important, include an order column in the playlists table, performance optimization. Okay. So how do these options work with respect to the frequent reorders of the playlist? Maybe I'm thinking about it all wrong. Maybe people don't want to reorder their playlists very often. Maybe the typical playlist is static. That reordering is relatively rare and only really done at the beginning of a playlist journey. Hello. We're looking at Android apps. In this video, we're looking at the Anki Android app for all of your flashcard needs. I think this is just straight up Android. Oopsie. We have Kotlin, mostly Kotlin, so is Kotlin. And I'm not really sure what I want out of looking at the Anki Android repo, but I will set a timer for 30 minutes. And we have an API. The API might be, there is a Anki web. Maybe we will look at that just to see if that's Anki web. And we have the Anki Droid directory. I don't know what Jacoco is. A Java code coverage library. Okay, and so we don't care about that. API has what? I don't know what iChai2 is. We have flashcards contract. The contract between Anki Droid and applications contains definitions for the supported URIs and columns. Flashcards contract defines the access to flashcard-related information. Flashcards consist of notes and cards. To find out more about notes and cards, see the Anki manual. In short, you can think of cards as instances of notes. So this is actually, I have used Anki in the past. Occasionally I try to use it. Personally, I find that it never really seems like the right balance. So I always stop using it. I find other ways of learning things and keeping information to be more productive for me. But I'm also probably a pretty unusual case. And I have used Anki in the past to do things like study for tests. So your mileage may vary. There are a lot of people who really like the Anki approach. But one of the things I find a little bit it doesn't seem quite right for me in the way that I work is this distinction between cards and notes. It's probably a useful distinction for programmers, but as a user-facing distinction, I find it a little bit confusing, and it doesn't seem to really enable the sort of flexibility that you would like it to, but it does kind of get in your way a few times. The most important data of notes/cards are fields. Fields contain the actual implementation of the flashcard that is used for learning. Typical fields are Japanese and English for a native English speaker to learn Japanese, or just front and back for a generic front, side, and back side of the card, without saying anything about the purpose. Note and card information is accessed in the following way. Each row of the note provider represents a note that is stored in the Anki Droid database. This provider must be used in order to find flashcards. The notes can be accessed by the note.content URI like this to search for note. So you're going to query flashcard note.content URI, a bunch of nulls, or this if you know the note's ID. I don't know if this is a local URI or a remote URI, and a bunch of other stuff. We get lots of nice comments. We get a content style URI, the authority for the flashcard provider. Okay, so what's the authority? We have build config authority. This is authority in the URI sense, I think. Okay, and it's the essentially the same as the apps like JVM package name, although there's a debug version and like a prod version. So I guess that's the authority. It's basically equivalent to the Java package name. So this is I think for local cards that are on the device as opposed to cards on Anki Web. So you get some cursor to the flashcard, and we have a URI. I don't know if the content thing is specific to Anki, but maybe it's specific to Android. Yeah. Content provider basics. A content provider manages access to a central repository of data. A provider is part of an Android application which often provides its own UI for working with the data. However, content providers are primarily used by other applications which access the provider using a provider client object. So I think this is for things like sharing with other apps, or maybe you have some way to, when you have some note-taking app, there might be a way to create a flashcard out of some note you have. And MSA says, "Hey, yeah, so glad to be able to make it this time." I'm glad to have you, MSA. All right, and so this is a description of the database, and I think this API is mainly for consuming by other things, and it has to have some structure that you know how to make a card, I guess. So like if you have like a note that says Joey says to call at 5 o'clock, maybe there's some way you can highlight it so the Joey says to call at is the front of the card and 5 o'clock is the back of the card, and maybe you can somehow encode that in the URL and ask Anki to make a new card or something along those lines. I don't know if that's something you can do, but let's see if that's maybe that's something we can find out about. This is about iOS. So how about Anki create card from app. But from SMS, create a new card from highlighted text. So on smartphones and e-readers, Anki gives one the ability to quickly send the currently highlighted text to a new card. I prefer to use the desktop version of Anki. It appears to be missing that functionality. Okay, so I think that's what this is for. That is interesting, but we're not going to look at that anymore. In the source directory, we have Amazon, presumably something like S3. Android test, main, and play. Play is probably the Play Store, which is the name of the Android store. All right, and what we've got Java, which I guess is where the Kotlin code goes as well. And Itchy2 must be the developer or something along those lines. And we have Anim, which is probably animation, Anki, which is probably the main Anki logic, annotation, animation, annotations, audio, which is for things like playing, the pronunciation of a word, lib Anki, compat, as I'm going to guess, compatibility, preferences is preferences, themes is themes, presumably some version of CSS. We have also utils and widget. Let's open all of these. I don't know. Let's see, we have about 21 minutes. Async doesn't have much. So the doing async like jobs in Android used to be pretty terrible. But Kotlin has proper coroutines. So async stuff is like should be pretty nice, but they have some support for like I guess just mainly like utilities. So they have this abstract async operation class, which has like a notification message, a notification title, and a handler message, the dialog handler message. So this is presumably for notifications. You have some message and title, and I don't know what the handler message is. Seems maybe different from a handler. And then we have deck picker. I think in Kotlin, this notation is basically adding this send notifications for async operation to the deck picker class, but you don't have to define that in the same file where you define the deck picker class. You can just do it from another file. And so to send a notification for async operation for deck picker, you give it an async operation and a channel. I don't know. This is maybe just the, it's an Anki channel. It's not just a Kotlin async channel. And we have this dialog handler, store a persistent message instructing Android to perform the operation. So we're going to store a message, passing in the operation handler message to message. Okay, so I guess it's a message to the handler. And we'll show a basic notification. So we show the title, show simple notification title. And so that's fine. And now I'm curious about what this channel is. Is there a channel.kt? No. Maybe the channel is defined in that very same file. How about notification channels? Create and update all the notification channels for the app. Here's some setup. Here. Okay, so here's the enum. So channel has general for general notifications, sync for synchronization notifications, global reminders, which has something to do with minimum cards due ticker title, deck reminders, scoped storage migration, and you can get the name of the channel. So this is, I guess, instead of having a something like a message bus, it seems like they have this enum that they are like different ways of batching up notifications. These might be literally different asynchronous channels. I forget exactly how coroutines work in Kotlin, but this seems like a message busy sort of structure where they're going to rely on Kotlin's coroutines and or async, which I think is probably built on coroutines to handle messaging between different parts of the app. Is I think what's going on. Here's libanki. You've got backend, which is maybe the remote stuff, or maybe it's the database. You have note util, sort order util. Note.toBackend note. We'll create an Anki.notes.note. We'll set the note to this. And we're going to return note of, is this the same note? Well, I guess this is creating a variable called note, which is initialized with some of the data from this. And then we're going to return a new note that has these fields set. And by backend note, I think it means that this is the data structure that the web server understands. So tree sitter, that's a good name. Like the tree sitter parser thingy. So this app is great. Helped me get the A+ on my last college exam. That's great. Anki is really good for studying for tests, I think. All right, so I wanted to see something. What did I want to see? So it looks like we're communicating to the backend. That's fine. Oh, I wanted to see what was in Amazon, just so that I know that I can safely ignore it. I think it's probably nothing. Android manifest. Permissions camera. Oh, okay. There's a directory. So we have Amazon main, blah, blah, blah. Wait, no. What have I done? I clicked on Amazon. Oh, this is just up one, up one directory. I thought it was an empty directory. I guess my brain stopped working for a second. Okay, so there's just a manifest in here. I don't know why it's called Amazon. We can see if there's like a reference to S3. That's just indexing into some data from some SVG. We do have, get it, on the Amazon App Store. Maybe the Amazon App Store needs that permission or something. Maybe it's for Kindle's, not for Kindle. Kindle? It's an Amazon thing, right? Fire is their tablet. I guess Kindle is their e-reader. I don't know if they still make Kindles. Yeah. You can still buy Kindles. You can still buy e-ink displays from Alibaba. This looks like an LCD display, which is different from an LSD display. Okay. So I guess that's what the Amazon directory is for, not for AWS stuff. Probably. And what else do we have? Okay, so that's backend stuff. Fine. UI has a bunch of things. These are just going to be all the UI components. I don't know what a key picker is. square dialog, which allows you to select a binding for a key press that does not yet support. This does not yet support Bluetooth headsets. So, okay, so this is for like keyboard shortcuts, it looks like. Button item adapter, badge drawable, access value display, key picker, on gesture listener. Let's look at the on gesture listener real quick. Simplifies and adapts the simple on gesture listener to a consumer accepting a card viewer gesture. I don't know what any of that means. So we get some motion event. I guess we're doing things like what happens on double tap, what happens on long press. On fling, like maybe fling is like the what's that app? The dating app. Swiping left, swiping right sort of stuff, except with, I guess, cards. Okay, themes. We have themes.kt. And update current theme takes a context. And we get some stuff from the shared preferences. Theme follows system preferences. Mode night follows system. I don't know. Maybe this is just operating on Android themes. I don't know how Android themes will work. So yeah, it seems to be some sort of maybe XML based style stuff. I don't know if it's related to CSS or HTML or what, but I think that Anki theme stuff was probably just manipulating Android themes. Here are some utils. We have things like bitmap util, color, etc., display utils. We will ignore that. Here's some widgets like the add note widget, widget permission, widget status. How about the add note widget? So this should be when you are adding a note. We have a companion object, which is some like data object that has some relationship in Kotlin. I forget exactly what it's about. This object, or this function, I guess, updates the widgets displayed in the provided context using the given app widget manager and widget IDs, setting up an intent to open a note editor with the caller as the deck picker. Yeah, I don't know what that's about. And we have in animation, we just have we just have activity transition animation.kt. And we have this function slide with the activity and direction. I guess we're sliding between different activities. Direction start. If is right to left activity, then override pending transition, blah, blah, blah. I don't know why they're having a custom slide activity. We also have this get animation options. This is left to right. It depends on the layout direction. That probably depends on the locale. And so on and so forth. We have some inverse transition, which I guess they're just like hand coding the inverse to the one they hand coded above. And tree sitter is asking, what's the data structure used for saving cards with their frequency? That's what we are just getting to. We have about 9 minutes left, and that I would consider to be the scheduling logic. It might be in the database. Automatic answer. So automatic answer, I think, is like you can, tell it that if you take too long to remember the Japanese word for tomato, it will automatically flip to the back of the card and humiliate you because you didn't do it fast enough. How about we look at scheduler? So scheduler is 752 lines, which is pretty big for Kotlin. You see that we are importing so many things that it takes me several scrolls to get to the bottom of the imports. We have this JVM inline and not in libanki. JVM inline, presumably, because this gets called a lot and it's fundamental. And we have some note. This is a parameter for scheduler.setDueDate. This contains 3 elements: start, an integer, and an int optional and change interval. And we have the set due dates thing, which I guess is the thing that's inlined. It's a value class. Figure out what a value class is. Inline value classes that avoid allocations and work like normal classes. All right, well, so it's something that you probably need to care about if you do Kotlin, but I don't want to dig into it too much. Okay, so we have this current state queue, which is a data class. Kotlin learned a lot from functional programming. So this is some data class. It's got a top card, a counts index, which is, I guess, set to counts.q, or is of type. I think it's of type counts.q. I don't know why a q is an index. An index seems like it should be an integer, and a q is a q, but that's what it is. I'll just have to keep in mind that counts index has probably a q API. We have states, which are scheduling states. We don't know what those are yet. It's presumably some enum. Can I click on it? No. Context, which is scheduling context. Some counts. And time box reach. This is maybe just for like saying I only want to study for 10 minutes. Learn ahead seconds is an int. And custom scheduling JS. I guess maybe this means that you can have custom scheduling logic in JavaScript, which is useful because I find the Anki scheduler to be for me, Anki is like feast or famine. Like as you get into it, a lot of times the cards will tend to bunch up so that you have days where you have like a ton of cards to get through and days where there's not so many, and they never seem to really line up with like what I actually feel like knowing myself, knowing psychology, knowing about how to learn things. I feel like I'm often looking at cards that I either know too well and they just won't go to the back of the line fast enough, or it's like hammering me with things that are too new and that I don't know yet. And there doesn't seem to be it never really has the right feel, the scheduler. All right, thanks for stopping. Thanks for watching, David. I almost said stopping by, but you were here for just the beginning of the stream, and I really appreciate that. All right. Okay, so this is part of this stuff. I'm curious about scheduling states. See if you can find out what this should be just some enum, I think. I think that maybe this scheduling states might be from a different repository. What is this? This is Anki Droid. Let's see if we can find Anki, just the regular Anki. It helps in reviewing it. Yeah. Anki Text. I don't know if Anki Text is the real company behind Anki, or I don't know if it's a company or what's going on. But this is, I thought, written in Python, although they've been moving to Rust. And I don't know what scheduling states is. Oh, we have a proto. Look at that. I mean, this code so far is all really nice. So if I have a concern about the scheduler, this seems like a nice enough laid out project. I'm glad they're moving away from Python. I personally don't love doing Python. I've done a lot of Python in the past. A lot of what I learned how to do programming wise, I learned in Python. So I have a fondness for it. But I'm finding that just for where I am, I don't personally love Python. So if I wanted to contribute to something like Anki, it's useful to me that they have places to contribute that are like, I can write some Rust or I can write some Kotlin or whatever. All right, but they have this proto, which is for the scheduler. The scheduling state has it's conceptually an enum, but these are messages rather than enum entries. There's new with some position. There's learning, which has remaining steps, scheduled seconds, elapsed seconds. I don't know if that's like lapsed seconds in the future. And then on optional card.fsrs memory state. Spaced repetition something maybe, which is the last thing. Then review has scheduled day, elapsed days, ease factor, lapses, leached. Leached is like it kind of penalizes cards that you fail too many times. Relearning. I don't really know how you get back in the relearning phase, but that's, I guess, something that you maybe used to know maybe a year ago, and then you're starting to forget again or something. Normal. And normal has one of new, learning, review, relearning, etc. Preview. I forget how preview works. A rescheduling filter, which has an original state, which is normal. And filtered, which I guess you maybe can potentially like filter to just the preview ones or filter to some rescheduling stuff. Like I think you're able to say like, I want to like look at the next day's cards because I have some extra time today and I won't tomorrow or whatever. And then I don't know what we're doing here, but this seems probably maybe is the top level scheduling state message. Is either normal or filtered. And then we have some custom data, which is just some string. The backend does not populate this field and get queued cards. The frontend is expected to populate it based on the provided card. If it's not set, when answering a card, the existing custom data will not be updated. And then we have messages for queued cards. The queue, I guess, has some enum. It's either new, learning, or review. A queued card has a card. A queue, which is just whether it's new, learning, or review. I'm guessing these seem like states, but I'm guessing that maybe under the hood what's happening is that there are actually 3 queues, a new queue, a learning queue, and a review queue. In fact, now that I've said it out loud, I'm 98% certain that that's how Anki works. And so I think that's the name of a queue, even though this is not itself a queue. And then the queue card has scheduling states and context, and so on and so forth. We'll keep this proto open. And LC is saying, okay, so first of all, tree sitter, let me go back. Tree sitter says it helps in reviewing information you've already studied. But yeah, it does help reviewing information. I guess what I was trying to say is like, if there are, for example, a lot of cards, and I guess without really getting into the details, I feel a bit like it's hard to like tune when should you really review something. When does it matter? When does it not matter? And getting that right. And I often find when using Anki that doesn't seem quite right to me. It is true that reviewing stuff that you've learned is important. And like the binomial theorem or something, maybe you need to review that once a year or once every 6 months. That sort of thing. But perhaps something with more detail, like you're memorizing a phone number, maybe you need to review that like every day for a while. And so Anki tries to do that. I just think that getting the schedule right for all of the different things you might need to learn and for all of the different people, that's kind of where it's hard. And the scheduler's gotten a lot better over the last few years. So I think they're obviously, it seems to me clear that they are aware that that some people feel that way, I guess. And then LC is saying, off topic, but it would be interesting to hear the rest of your thoughts in learning and meta learning and psychology learning. Yeah. That is also the kind of topic that I like to share views on. And I will continue doing that. I don't know if I don't know about the rest of my thoughts. I feel like I have like an infinite supply of thoughts about it, but that's going to be, I guess, increasingly a theme of this channel, because we're going to be building some learning stuff. And I don't think, I think I've tried to say this in a fairly recent video, but so like my background, I went to graduate school for psychology, studied cognitive and developmental psychology. I eventually decided that I wanted to switch to math, and so I ended up getting a master's degree in psychology, and then I got a PhD in math. So my thinking about education is informed by a couple of things. One is the psychological literature that's pretty close to what I was studying when I was in grad school, but also the need for me to quickly learn things. For example, as I switched fields, and so I have a lot of different thoughts about that, and I have an interest in building tooling associated with how to learn things, and but I don't think I can give a concise description of what my thoughts are. But what I can do is continue to share my thoughts, such as they are. Congrats, info response. I guess this is for rewarding you for learning, maybe. We are out of time, but let me go back to this scheduler.kt stuff. We'll just look at it for a little bit. So there's some worker thread. I guess this is some annotation that tells you about Kotlin coroutines. And we have a scheduler, which is open. I think open means you can add to it as a class. I'm not sure. And it takes a collection. I don't know if I think a collection is maybe multiple decks. There's some legacy API stuff. Is there a non-legacy? I don't know. But at any rate, let's look maybe at current state, which returns, it's maybe a little bit like a getter, because it seems to return current queue state, rather. It returns an object current queue state, which is nullable. And so we're going to look at the queued cards, which we got somewhere. I don't know if they were defined here, or maybe this is a getter for the queued cards or something. And we're going to return the result of doing this big, what is possibly a computation, or maybe we're just calling this function. If the queue.cardslist.first or null, I'm not sure what first or null means. Then we're going to call this current queue state, which is either a function or a constructor. The top card will be the card that we get from it. I don't know if it is the thing that is in a parameter from this let block, or if we got it from somewhere else. We're going to apply some start timer. And then when it.queue, I guess when the queue has stuff in it, then we'll set counts index to, oh, this is this is pattern matching, I think. We're going to look at the queue, and that's the name of the queue in the proto. And it's either new, learning, review, etc. And so we're going to set the counts index to the counts. You can set how many new count you want. You can set how many learned counts you want. And so this is just populating that. And we're just populating the rest of the fields from the state of I think the it probably comes from here, but I'm not sure. And I guess I'm not going to really look at the rest of this. But if we want to know that, I am curious about how the schedule is stored on the disk. But now that I see that there are protos for the scheduler, that seems like we don't have to have a super crazy database scheme. We just really have to persist the proto stuff to the here's more scheduler stuff. This is probably a good thing to look at. You just have to persist the protos to the disk somehow. Probably as a database. Let's see if there's a SQLite database. I guess in lib Anki. Okay, so here's some class DB, close, blah, 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 query scalar. Insert. Into some table. I don't know where to find the actual things. DB, deck, storage, maybe? The storage, I guess, might be in memory. This is maybe storage for the decks themselves. You have this create DB, so maybe not for the decks. Update call set CRT equals get start day. The line is required for testing. Otherwise, Rust will override a mocked time. Oh, you know what? I think that maybe we are communicating with the Rust layer, which I think we are. Let's go to Anki Droid, the GitHub group or whatever they're called. The Anki Android backend is a JNI. JNI, I think, is Java native interface, essentially a foreign function interface. A JNI bridge between Anki Droid and Anki Desktop's Rust code. So I think that this is maybe where some of the database layer stuff is. I'm not sure exactly what the Rust code does. But we're not going to really look too much into it. Maybe we'll look just enough to see if it's fast to see what's going on. So here's RS Droid. We have backend native methods, Rust cleanup, translations, exceptions. And we do have a database folder, and we have some SQL statements. And we have an Anki database cursor, Anki supports SQL, blah, 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 blah. So let's look at some of these database statements. Bind blob, bind string. Do we have like select? Yeah. Well, at least in the tests, we have select. We have a database, util. Yeah, so this layer seems to be maybe the stuff that has a database, which is possibly why we didn't see something like a room implementation in the Anki Android thing. And we have this Anki proto stuff, and presumably somehow we're going to convert protos to something we can store in the database. Yeah, definitely repetition is super helpful for learning and comprehension. Okay, so I'm going to leave Anki Android there. Let's move along. All right, we are looking at Finamp. We're looking at Android apps. This is Finamp. It's a client for the Jellyfin media library that you can take all of your videos and music and put it on somewhere on your network, like a network attached storage, and you can stream stuff to your Android phone. The update that I am looking at Jellyfin currently, or rather Finamp. Okay. And we'll set a timer for 30 minutes. Okay, so Finamp, I believe, is a Flutter app. It's 98.6% Dart. And it also has some iOS stuff. There might be some Android specific stuff, but I'm guessing usually most of the interesting stuff might be in the lib directory, which is the stuff that's cross-platform. So, and in the Android app folder, we have source, main, Finamp. We just have the main activity. This might be auto-generated. In fact, it probably is. And so we have the lib directory. We have components. I don't know what components is. I10N is probably internationalization, models, screens, and services. And then we have color schemes. Main.dart might be interesting. So models, I'm guessing, are the data models, like model view controller style. Services are presumably things that are going to run in the background, maybe also access the network. Screens might be the same as UI. Let's see if we can eliminate screens. So we have add download location screen.dart. Add to playlist screen, album screen, logs screen, music screen. How about we just pick one at random, music screen. Extends stateful widget. Okay, so it's a stateful widget, and it's got some state. And the state is what? We keep track of is searching, but that's not private. We have the whether to show the shuffle floating action button, which is false by default. We have some text editing controller. A search query, which is a nullable string. I'm not sure that all of this stuff belongs in the music screen state, because you're going to have to, anytime any one of these things changes, you're going to have to rebuild, right? Is that what we want? Maybe it is. So if we change the search query, do we have to necessarily change the music screen? I guess if the music screen is if the music screen is showing the results of the search query, like if we want to find all songs that begin with the letter T, then I guess we do want to update it when. But maybe we only want to update the like list thing, whatever that's called, the part that looks like a spreadsheet. We also have a tab controller. I don't know what that's doing, and an audio service helper. We're using getIt, which I think is just some service locator thing. Flutter getIt. GetIt is a package that allows you to access objects from anywhere in your app without depending on widgets or context. They describe this other thing describes it as a dependency injection. I think seems like it's just basically a wrapper around globals. At any rate, we have a bunch of services: Finamp, user helper, Jellyfin, API helper. We have this stop searching thing, which is going to set state. We're going to clear the text editing controller. Put the search query to nil, set is searching to false. Then we have this tab index callback. And it's got this Finamp settings helper. The Finamp settings show tabs.entries. .where element is element.value. An element at tab controller bang index. I guess the bang, I think in Dart also means non-null .key. What is that doing? So there's some element. And I guess the element is passed as an argument to this where function. And where's value used, or I don't know. we're getting some element and getting its index. I don't know where index comes from. And it seems like we're ultimately getting the key. And if the tab controller is non-null and some other stuff is true, then we're going to set state, set shuffle FAB to true. This is, I guess, so the tab controller is non-null and the tab key is songs, artists, or albums. Okay, so this is trying to decide whether to show you the shuffle button. And I guess it's only showing you the shuffle button if we're looking at the songs, artists, or albums tab. See if you can pull up a screenshot. So that's some screenshot. Yeah, okay. So I'm looking at it on my device. So the music, let's see if I can find the music page. Finamp. It might be possible to find it in the UI files, but that might not be the best. This, I think, is basically what we're looking at. We've got albums, artists, playlists, and genres. And so I guess you can't, where's the code again? So if it's songs, artists, or albums, then we show the floating action button, which seems inconsistent with this image because there is no floating action button to shuffle. And what are the other options? Songs, artists, and albums. The songs, I think, is just cut off, but we can't, I guess, randomly shuffle genres, is what this is maybe telling us. And the tab keys, what we got here, we're looking at the settings helper. I still don't feel like I understand what's going on here. So Finamp settings show tabs.entries. Where element is element. So I guess this just means we're for each of these entries, we're getting the value and maybe this is checking whether the tab controller index is equal to this element, I guess is maybe what this is saying. And then if that's true, then we'll get the key. Something along those lines. And if the tab controller is null, then we won't show the shuffle button. And then we've got this void build tab controller, which will remove some listener, the tab index callback, and we'll set the tab controller to tab controller of some stuff. And whatever vsync is set to this. I'm not sure what vsync is. Vertical sync, I don't know. And then we have this init state, which is, we're on the music screen. And we're going to call super, which we have to do. And we're going to call build tab controller, which was here. And then we implement dispose, and we'll dispose the tab controller if we need to. And we may, so here's a function to get the floating action button. And it's going to give you a list of tabs, I guess. This somehow grabs a list of tabs. Show the floating action button only on the albums, artists, and songs tab, which I thought we did above. But this is doing what? We're returning a floating action button object. And we might display an error in the snack bar. And I guess there's also maybe on the floating action button, we have this on pressed implementation. And we're going to await for the audio service helper. This is some async method. So we can await it. And we're going to call shuffle all on Finamp settings is favorite. If the tab controller index is the index of song. And we have this child icon is this is just saying that the floating action button icon is the shuffle icon. Why are we? It seems like we're only shuffling the favorites. Is that right? And then if we are on the artist tab, then we're going to get this Jellyfin API helper selected mix artist IDs. Mix artist IDs. If this is empty, then we have some error that I guess it will show for the snack bar. Otherwise, we're going to call start instant mix for artists. And that's maybe a Jellyfin API call. Look up instant mix. I try to use radio style sorting when listening to music because I tend to grab a lot of music I blah blah blah. I don't know, and as I learn it, start radios from there. Instant mix would be great. I just don't understand how it runs. I use instant mix on Iron Maiden. I get a list with Beck, the Eels, Megadeth, Avenged Sevenfold, and the Decemberists. Hey, suggest the algorithm you want. Remember, being a computer, it only knows what it tells you. But you tell it, rather. Okay. I don't know what instant mix is based on. Apparently, Beck. Megadeth and Beck. Or something. Whatever it just said. Okay, so this is something, I think this probably does not run on the phone. Although this is, it's passing in the selected mix artists IDs. Add artist to mix builder list. Okay. And let's look up start, what is it, start? I mean, it really has to be some sort of API call unless your client, you're going to be streaming this from, let's just say you have like a network attached storage, a NAS. You're going to be streaming it from the NAS, so that the NAS it probably is in a better position to compute which songs it thinks you want to hear. The other implementation is for the phone to compute it, and each time the song one song ends, like request the next song or something along those lines. This is audio service helper. Start instant mix. Base item DTO. I don't know what DTO is. And then we've got this Jellyfin API helper get instant mix of item. Okay. So this does seem to be, we call replace queue with item. Okay, so it does seem to be calling the Jellyfin API. And what? And that's basically it for that thing. And then we have this build for the music screen rather. So we have this build. We have to implement build for a stateful widget. This is not the stateful widget. This is the state of the stateful widget. And we're going to return value listenable builder of box of Finamp user. I don't know what box is. Not Jellyfin, but Flutter. So maybe it's just a box, like a UI box. And we have this Finamp user thing here. A Finamp user adapter. Finamp user has an ID, a base URL, access token, server ID, current view ID, and views. This is some generated code. Type adapter generator. I don't know what .g.dart is. This file contains classes returned by Jellyfin. Some values may not be exactly right. Okay, so I guess we're returned maybe by Jellyfin the service. This is Finamp, the Android app. And whatever Hive is. I think it's maybe a Java thing. Oh, it's not. Before you start, consider using ISAR, a Flutter database by the author of Hive that is superior in every way. Okay, so boxes might be a Hive thing. But what is it? What is it? What is it? It seems to be some sort of database thing. A lightweight and blazing fast key value database written in pure Dart, inspired by Bitcask. So it's some key value database. What are boxes? All data stored in Hive is organized in boxes. A box can be compared to a table in SQL, but it doesn't have the structure or contain anything. Okay. What is a DTO? Something object. DTO class. Ditch the monolithic data class. Embrace DTOs. Data something object. Let's highlight all of the DTOs. The monolith's demise. Data transfer object. These slender and focused fellows handle data exclusively for API communication. They're the translators between your app and the external world, mapping incoming and outgoing data without a single domain logic hiccup. See if there's a Wikipedia entry on here. All right, so we'll read that later. I added it to Wallabag. You can't see that because I did it, or maybe I didn't do it. There we go. Wallabag. And I will use the Wallabag Android app to read it later. Okay, so this is some data transfer object. There's, I assume that what it's up to is there's some mismatch between how Dart, essentially substruct that is modeled in Dart, and then Jellyfin, I think, is probably written in C Sharp, if I remember correctly. And so it has some model. Maybe they communicate on the wire or via JSON. I don't know how it works, but there has to be some moving around of fields and stuff to get all of this stuff right. And we are defining all these Hive fields and the JSON serializable, et cetera, et cetera. So these are going to be serialized to JSON, probably stored to disk in some Hive key value format that's optimized. And then this box thing that we saw is probably just saying that the music page is using the Finamp user box. And we have this users listenable. I'm not sure what that's up to, but something about audio and listening. Unless it's just listening in the code sense. And then we have this, well, so the value listenable builder has a value listenable and a builder. This is a pattern that we saw on Twitch, I guess yesterday, with future builder and probably also stream builder. I don't know what value listenable builder is. I don't know if that's part of Flutter or part of some library. Value listenable builder, a widget. whose content stays synced with a value listenable. It's an interface for subclasses of listenable that expose a value. And listenable is an object that maintains a list of listeners. Okay, so I guess this is some this listenable Finamp users listenable, I guess, maintains a list of listeners. So essentially all people subscribed to something. What thing? Probably stuff about Finamp users. So this is, I think, conceptually related to what we've seen in the other Android apps. We saw that I think it was Wallabag was using an event bus made by the green people whose name I kind of forget. We saw that I think Anki was using the what seemed to be the async capabilities of Kotlin to have a notification style message bus sort of thing. I think that probably this is similar. Listeners are essentially things that are subscribed to a certain kind of information. And it's kind of like a message bus. And so this is just sort of really a wrapper around that. And then one of the things that's wrapped is another value listenable builder. This time from the Finamp settings box. And that also has a builder. And that builder is maybe going to do some work. We're going to get the Finamp settings value. And that'll be some final Finamp setting thing. We'll get the tabs from the user's tab order. So maybe you can reorder the tabs. And we have some logger. The logger might say that we're rebuilding the music screen tab controller, and we'll call build tab controller. Then we have this will pop scope. Maybe pop some sort of scope off a stack. So on will pop is async. And if we are searching, we'll stop searching and return false. Otherwise, we'll return true. And child of what? Maybe child of will pop scope is a scaffold with an app bar. This is maybe like in classic Android, like transitioning to a new intent. This seems to be like another layer, another like app level thing. We've got a new bar at the top. We've got a new scaffold. And the title is searching with some text field. And something about localizations. And the bottom is a tab bar. And it's set to is scrollable true. And then leading is searching. Actions is, yeah. I don't know what any of this is. I guess something that happens when you start searching. Maybe the UI changes. I can see if I can. I have this on my phone. Let me see if I can try to search for something. I don't know. The UI doesn't seem to change fundamentally, but. And then we have some tab bar. The body is tab bar view with the tab controller, and the children are other tabs. And for each of the tabs, we're going to map this music screen tab view is like a wrapper around, I guess, the standard tab view. And the sort order, we're going to look in the Finamp settings to figure out what the sort order is. Okay, so that's the music screen. This is actually, as somebody who's a total novice at Flutter, this is actually doing a lot more work for a single widget than I would have expected. I wonder if the app would be more responsive if this were maybe refactored to cut up and separate things as much as possible, but that may be at odds with using some of these libraries like this Hive stuff and like some of the get it state management stuff. It seems like those libraries are often about passing state around, and so you may have to you have to figure out how to pass state around without it interfering too much with like your widget layout. And so I think that's maybe the tension of a framework like Flutter. But in truth, I don't really know. So that was the audio screen. In components, sorry, music screen rather. I guess were we just in components? We're in screens. So let's look at music screen component. Why not? So we have okay. So these are like things that go on the screen, like an album item card has a key, an item, a parent type, what happens when you tap it, and whether to add a settings listener. As some base item. And when you build it, we're going to return a card with some margin and a clip R rect, maybe rounded rectangle, and some more listener stuff. Presumably, we're going to pull an image of the album from somewhere, and so on and so forth. Okay, where are we in time? We have 3 minutes left. Let's see if there's anything else. We saw a little bit, there's an API wrapper for calling the Jellyfin server. Here's services, album image provider, censored log. I'm glad to see the log is censored. There's a lot of stuff I see doesn't censor private information from logs. Here's the Jellyfin API.dart, API helper, locale helper, music player background task, media state stream, process artist, sync helper. Let's look at music player background task. Largely copied from Just Audio's default shuffle order. There's some Finamp shuffle order, which has random stuff in the list of indices, and it's going to shuffle stuff. Indices.shuffle random. Some stuff about swapping position, etc. And I guess we're going to take the index. This is about inserting indices, etc., etc. That's fine. That's not what I came to look for. A music background player task extends base audio handler. I don't know if that's a Flutter thing. Base audio handler class. Base class for implementations of audio handler. It provides default implementations of all methods and streams. Okay, so this is, I think, Flutter support for audio that is being used by Finamp. So we get the audio player, passing in some configuration, like buffer duration. We have this Darwin load control, which is, I think Darwin is an Android thing, right? And then we have some Q audio source, which we're getting by concatenating audio source with no children in some shuffle order. It seems like maybe we populated shuffle order ahead of time, that when we ask to shuffle, we're just shuffling essentially in a pre-shuffled order. This is logging stuff. We're getting some service getting through getIt. And LC is telling me about DTOs. Mainly exposed as objects, things that come either from the database storage. They are mainly inert. Cool. Basically plain composite associative data objects written as plain maps or classes. Cool. Thanks. They're like Pocos. Is Pocos for C? I don't think I've heard of Pocos. All right. Is stopping. So this is all, I guess all of the hard audio stuff is mainly implemented by the Flutter audio thingamajiggy. And then we have this music player background task constructor, it looks like. Propagate all events from the audio player to audio service clients. So we're calling player playback event stream dot listen to an event. So I guess we're listening to the playback event stream, and we're getting some things like the previous state, etc. And we'll add the current state, and if it's non-null, then we'll get queue item at current index. I don't know what the queue is in this case. Differences in queue order or item ID are considered track changes. Okay, so we might have changed tracks and what? If we're done here, we update playback progress. And this is some just conditional about whether we have a playback state or etc. It says we're propagating stuff, propagate all events from the audio player to the audio service clients. But where are we sending, where are we propagating information? Maybe by calling on track changed? Maybe just by recording them here and adding them to playback state? I don't know. And then just more stuff. When we call play, it returns a future void if a sleep timer has been set and the timer went off, causing play to pause. If the user starts to play audio again and the sleep timer hasn't been explicitly turned off, then reset the sleep timer. This is useful if the sleep timer pauses play too early and the user wants to continue listening. If the sleep timer is set and its value is null, restart it for another period. I don't know what this sleep timer is about. I don't know who sets it. Maybe you can ask it this only play for like an hour or whatever. Maybe it's something user facing. I don't know. And then we have stop. Seek to the start of the first item in the queue. So I guess when you stop, then it's going to go to the beginning of the song. I guess that's good. You don't want that necessarily for videos, but for songs, it seems to be what you want. And some stuff about managing queues. We are over time, and I'm going to stop looking at Finamp here, and I'm going to move on to the next one. Pocos are the C# equivalent. Ah, I see. Or were. All right. So we are moving on to whatchamacallit. I must have closed it. All right, we'll look at Spotkin front end. So not Spotkin front end, that's not what it's called. It's called Spotkin Flutter. Regarding the earlier hand-rolled offline sync implementation, if I looked at CRD-based approaches in local first, yes. But not much. So the so CRDTs are used a lot for things like Google Docs or Etherpad. Is that what it's called? So like collaborative editing. This seems to be about the Ether cryptocurrency. Modern real-time collaborative document editor. So I think that these things tend to use CRDTs. I feel like I don't know yet how I want to handle database synchronization. I'm tempted to try to make the databases have the same structure, but I think that maybe the hand-rolled approach is right, that you should go through the front end of the API rather than the back end. I'm not positive though. Part of me just still wants to like synchronize the databases and have but I mean the mobile database and the backend database have different needs. Typically the mobile database you'd have one per user, whereas in a lot of cases the backend database might be just one giant database with access restricted by user or something like that. I don't know. Elsie, if you have any suggestions for offline sync, I'd be curious to hear, because I feel like it's one area where I I just haven't made a decision about how I think it ought to go. I don't have any strong opinions about it, other than it seems hard and there don't seem like a ton of perfect options. Hello. Hello. We're looking at Android apps. In this video, we're taking a look at Spotkin Flutter. This is Answer Everywhere. Spotkin Flutter is a Flutter app written by Rivers Cuomo, who is an active GitHub contributor. Rivers Cuomo from the band Weezer has been coding for a while, and he wrote a like a Weezer based song guessing game. He's written a few tools for like managing his life as a rock star, and he's also written a lot of tools for I guess you might call it managing songwriting. And I think that potentially that's where Spotkin fits in. Let's see, there's some, I don't know if the main one's called Spotkin Server. Yeah, so here's the, let me move chat out of the way for just a moment. So here's the server. It's a Python package that updates one or more of your Spotify playlists every day with a random selection of songs from any playlist you specify. Here's mine. So we can click on this, and I think I can't actually see it because I'm not going to log in on this VM, although we can see it. So we've got some Sushi and the Banshees, Fat Butt, the Cocktail Twins, and a bunch of other stuff. Maisie Star, Eminem. So this is what Rivers is listening today. And I'm guessing, and Rivers, let me know if this is not correct. I'm guessing that part of the goal here is to ensure that he's exposed to a bunch of different musical influences, because that's the sort of thing that you want to have when you're writing a song. When you're doing any sort of creative endeavor, you want to keep managing your the input, the stuff that you consume, because what your brain is doing is essentially a sort of averaging or smoothing operation over a lot of the stuff you've consumed. And so if you want to keep your output fresh, and I think he's done a good job of keeping his output fresh. You want to make sure that your input is also fresh. And so one way to do that is to randomize over like a really large area. So we saw like a bunch of rap, there was some rock, presumably lots of pop music from all different periods. And so I don't know what the server is doing. I'm guessing the server is looking up some Spotify playlist that somehow enumerates the universe of possible songs, applying some sort of shuffle operation, and reordering the playlist and like resaving it. There may be like a parent playlist that so that you never if the server crashes and you've only reorganized half of it, you don't want to like lose some of the stuff in the universe playlist, or maybe some of the songs are hard coded or something. I don't know, but we're going to not look at the server. We're going to look at the Flutter app, and I'm not sure really what this app is going to do. It's the Flutter web frontend for Spotkin, currently developed here. I think I clicked on this before, and it was requiring me to log into Flutter before I could see, Spotify before I could see anything. So I'm not sure what the app looks like. So it says right now we can log into Spotify through our website. So we should see some sort of API call to Spotify. You can set a target playlist. Must be a playlist you own. So this is what I was calling the universe. I guess in the code or at least in the documentation, that'll be called the target. Set any number of playlists. Oh, no. I'm wrong. The target playlist is the playlist that will contain the randomized stuff. Set any number of public playlists to source from. So I guess there's not a God playlist. There is a God list, a list of sources. I don't know if these are like typically going to be in this example like playlists that are his own, or they might just be like playlists he's found by searching the public playlists. and the quantities of tracks to pull. And again, I don't know if that's like, here's this playlist for high BPM songs for running. Maybe I only want to pull a few of those, but here's this other playlist of like masterpieces written in the last 80 years. I maybe want to pull more of those. I don't know if that's something that's per public playlist or if it's something you set and it applies to all of them, but we'll see that. And then you click a button to update your playlist with the tracks from the source playlists. Okay, so this is for, I'm guessing that day to day he probably uses this for like adding new playlists or removing playlists that have turned out to be dogs or that he's just tired of or whatever. And then to run locally, he gives you some stuff. He's using VS Code. Essentially, the front end replaces the old spreadsheet method of storing and editing Spotkin jobs. So there's this spreadsheet. And this is actually probably somewhat useful to look at. So we have this. I was hoping I could expand this, but I don't know if I can. So the source playlist, this is some either URL or possibly just the playlist ID. These seem like URLs. These seem like maybe they're IDs. And Rivers Rad. Maybe I'm just too zoomed in. Is this Rivers Radius? Rivers Radio, and then River Size. Maybe River Size is exercise. And so the playlists have names like albums I'm checking out, New Music Friday, 500 albums. I'm curious about 500 albums. I don't know if this is a public playlist. The 500 greatest albums. I don't know if this is the same one. Was it 4 blah 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 4i3q ending in CW? No. But what if I just take this URL and plop in this? I must enable DRM. Yeah, it's just 500 albums, and Rivers Cuomo is, I assume this is the owner of the playlist. And you've got BB King, The White Stripes. Okay, cool. And then liked songs picks. Presumably he's liked some songs, and maybe this is some subset of them. New Music Friday picks, nostalgia, 70s love songs, lots of 70s stuff, new metal, mellow classics, big on the internet. I'm pretty curious about big on the internet. He's trying to stay, people got to buy his albums. So alt stuff from the 2000s, 80s, and 90s. Broadway, some show tunes. I guess if you're doing some like power pop stuff, you may want to draw from some Broadway stuff. Low priority. And these may be the counts of songs to pull in. So Broadway maybe just pulls in one song. I don't know. Chorus music, classic punk, hot country, hyper pop, etc., etc. Elliott Smith has his own section. He's set to 0. Then upcoming set list and workout pop. All right, cool. Big on the internet. Big dogs, Apple. Okay. So that's this is the spreadsheet. I am going to keep this spreadsheet around just in case I need to refer to it to sort of understand the logic of what this app is doing. And there's web support. So this seems to be primarily a web client. And I think that he says this, a Flutter web front end. So I don't know if he has like an Android client. There doesn't seem to be an Android folder, but everything's in lib. We have screens, models, services, widgets. This seems to be using the same layout structure that Finamp was using. We do have some services. We have appcore.dart and main.dart, and underscore archive is what? It may be equivalent to like commenting out code. I'm not sure what archive is about. We do have some issues. how to auto run once in 24 hours, etc. Okay. Opened 2 days ago. It's kind of wild. So this seems to be under active development. And it seems to be working from an issue list. This is kind of cool. All right. So we'll ignore the archive stuff. I don't know whether that stuff is important. Here's main.dart. You're setting up some service locator. I don't know if we're using a like a library for service locations. We're setting a URL strategy, which is the path URL strategies. So I guess it's like the strategy pattern. And I kind of want to know whether this is like a service locator or library or something else. Okay, so service locator is some like a hash map. I assume that a map in Flutter is a hash map and not some sort of like fancy tree or trie, like I think it is in Haskell. But so I'm going to call it a hash map from string to dynamic. I guess dynamic maybe being like a dynamically typable thingamajig, and you give it some config, and he's going to use get it. So get it is the service locator library I was talking about before. And he's going to register a lazy singleton of Spotify service. It's going to be set to Spotify service with the client ID. It looks like these are pulled from the shell on whatever machine is running the server. And so the client ID, the client secret, the redirect URI. I don't know what the Spotify redirect URI is, but some redirect URI and a scope, maybe the scope for an access scope. What's it called? Like OIDC, OIDC Connect or OpenID or one of those things. And we also register a lazy singleton for storage service. So storage service is presumably going to store stuff on disk. I'm not sure really what there is to store on disk for the web front end. Conceptually, okay, yeah, I do know it. So all the stuff that's in the spreadsheet has to be now stored on disks. So the identities of the public playlists, how many songs to pull from each playlist, all that stuff needs to be stored here. But a lot of the state is of course some of the state will be managed, I think, by the Python app, and then what you might think of as the bulk of the state is really just managed by Spotify by reordering the playlists. We have a recipe widget and a settings card. So I wanted to see what the storage service was about. So here's the storage service .dart. So we have this get jobs thing, and we're going to look in the local storage of the browser with the storage key, and we'll get stored jobs. So I guess this is storage that like goes away if you like delete your browser data. And if there's no jobs, then we don't have to worry about it. Otherwise, we're going to parse jobs, which is going to give us a list of jobs, and maybe the jobs are stored in something like JSON. And we're going to iterate over the jobs, and we're going to print the job target playlist name. So that's the name. If I'm understanding the naming convention correctly, that's going to be the playlist that will contain all of the random songs. Let me move this chat aside for a moment. And some recipe count. So maybe the recipe is the thing that tabulates how many of each song, how many of each source playlist to add to the target playlist. And then we're just going to return those jobs. That's just getting the jobs, parsing them, figuring out what the ingredients are. And then save jobs is presumably going to do the reverse. We're just going to save all the stuff. Add job. We'll add a job to jobs and resave it. So naively, you would think this is going to, if save jobs just appended stuff, this would save multiple versions of the save job, but there's probably code here to make sure that you're overwriting something. And we are saving in JSON, which is my conjecture. So save jobs will do what? So we'll JSON encode the jobs by calling jobs map the job to JSON to list. I don't know why. Oh, okay. So I was just misparsing it. So I guess we JSON encode each job, and then the collection of jobs is mapped to a list, maybe? Or we have to map each one to a list in order to concatenate them or something along those lines. And at any rate, we get a string of encoded jobs, which I guess is like a string of that encodes a list. And we're going to write that to local storage with the storage key. So we're just overwriting anything that was there as opposed to appending. Okay, and then update jobs. Update job will presumably just update the thing. So you're passing a job, you're getting its index. So you're looking at its target playlist ID. So maybe you can only have one job for target playlist. Or no. This seems to be, yeah. It seems like there's one index where that has a specific target playlist ID. If it's -1, then it doesn't exist. If it's not -1, then we set the jobs at that index to the new job and we save the jobs. You can also delete job. You can get job by playlist ID, which is consistent with what we just decided, which is that each, I guess, target playlist has only a single job. And then you can parse jobs, which is just essentially calling JSON decode with some error handling. So what we don't know yet is what the jobs do. Let's find out how the jobs are like executed. Here's the sample jobs, so we can see the format of the JSON. So the example is Spotify. Example playlist 1. It has some playlist ID. Presumably this is the target playlist. These are the songs that I'm listening to today. That's what we saw when we opened up his playlist. And remove low energy is false. So he has some way of, I assume this is something he's done and not something that Spotify exposes. But some way of deciding that songs are maybe going to bring him down. He doesn't want to deal with them. And we have last track IDs. I'm not sure what this is for, but maybe this is the last track that was played. Here's some songs that will not be on there, like Khaled. I've never actually pronounced this guy's name. DJ Khaled. The Beatles, Halsey, the Beach Boys, Devo, Big Sean, E40, Big Boy, Gang of Four, and My Bloody Valentine. Since the Beatles and the Beach Boys and Devo are on here, I'm guessing that at least some of these are artists that he's like heard a lot, and these are not necessarily banned because he doesn't like them. Maybe he doesn't like them. I don't know, but they might be banned because he likes them so much that they're overplayed, or in a previous time he liked them so much that they were overplayed. I don't remember who Halsey is. Okay, so some singer from New Jersey. Okay, and then we have band song titles. Should I Stay or Should I Go? High Hopes, Blizzard's on Waiting Room, Psycho Killer, Sweet Jane, Generals and Majors, and Marquee Moon. Marquee Moon's a television song, I believe. So I guess television is not banned, but it's as a band. It's not banned as a band, but it is. This particular song is banned. And similarly, Psycho Killer is Talking Heads. Talking Heads doesn't seem to be banned, but it's not going to show up on this playlist. That this particular song. Okay, and then there are banned track IDs and banned genres, like Colombian pop. I don't know what many of these are. Plug NB, and I don't know how. Exceptions. There may be some exceptions to band genre. So like Eminem gets an exception, Kendrick Lamar gets an exception. I don't know which genre he's in, but then we have some recipe. So the recipe is the source playlist name is albums I'm checking out. Here's the ID, I guess, of the playlist, the source playlist. In this case, there's only one source, although you can see that the recipe has multiple, as it is a list, so it has space for multiple stanzas, and quantity 10. So it's pulling in 10 songs from this job. And there's some config here. And he's not going to give us his Spotify login, which is good. It seemed like the playlist we were looking at had more than 10 songs. So let's see if that's I mean, this is just a sample job. It's not necessarily the job that's actually being used to populate this playlist. So this one has like 56 songs. They seem to all have been added on the same day. So I'm guessing that this might be like that config might have been some starting point, and then tweaked over time, which is why you need the front end, I guess, to tweak it. Here's recipe widget.dart. So this is some widget for managing the recipes. The recipes are the list essentially of source playlists and how many to pull from each one. I don't know if the band stuff is also part of the recipe, but at any rate, the recipe is a stateful widget and what? We've got a list of initial ingredients, some, I guess, callback for when the ingredients change, a list of jobs, an update job function, and then the state of the recipe widget has a list of ingredient rows. Whoopsie. The Spotify service, which we're grabbing from Get and init state is going to init ingredient rows. So this is presumably going to be some scrollable list of ingredients. I'm not sure I understand what an ingredient is yet. Maybe it's just one of the things in the recipe. We have this add new row function. If job.recipe.any ingredient. So if in the job, we're going to look at the recipe. And if any of the ingredients have a playlist ID that matches the playlist ID we're working with, then we'll say this playlist is already in the recipe. Okay, so that's sort of like a failure mode if we're trying to add new row on something that's already in there. I thought this was the end of the function, but this is just the end of this if block. And then so we create a new ingredient with the playlist and quantity of 5. I guess it's like the default quantity. Call update job. And we'll copy the job with the new ingredient. So we saw what storage service update job did. Is just like sets the fields. And we'll call set state with adding the ingredient row to the ingredient rows. So that's just going to add it to the rows of this widget. And then init ingredient row is presumably just going to walk over the existing rows. So widget initial ingredients map each ingredient to an ingredient row with some quantity controller. I don't know what a quantity controller is, but we're going to take the ingredient quantity as a string. And maybe you can, maybe the quantity controller lets you do things like increase or decrease the quantity, like by clicking up or down or something. And then we're going to also, the playlist will be part of it. And we'll say whether we updated the widget. Something about handling dismiss. You can, I guess, swipe left or right, or at least swipe right to confirm and remove the ingredient. And so this is some dismiss thing. I assume this is part of Flutter and not like another library. Intent, swipe to dismiss. Okay, so this is just handling like the gesture to dismiss. There's stuff about confirming to delete. Left swipe to set the quantity to 0. That's like a reset without removing the ingredient, I guess. And so on. When you remove the ingredient, you call set state and say that you removed it and you update the job. I think update job could probably be called outside of set state, but that's probably doesn't matter for an app like this. So build quantity dropdown is going to probably build the quantity dropdown with the ingredients in the rows. So this is maybe for like setting a new quantity. So it's width is size 70. It's a drop down button form field. The value is we're going to try to parse an int of 5, which I think is the default. And items will be a list of, I guess, 21 numbers. List that generate 21 index. Where is index? Oh, okay. So I'm guessing this is like starting at the index. We'll maybe have like 21 numbers below so that you can scroll down and set them or something along those lines. I don't really know what list generate and drop down menu item do, but that's just a guess of the sort of thing it might be doing. Then we have an unchanged callback, and which is passive value. If the value is null, the value is non-null, then we call set state, setting the quantity controller.text to the value as a string, and we call update jobs and storage with the index and the value because we've changed on the UI. I believe what we're doing is we're changing the number of songs to pull from a playlist, and that's got to write that change to the storage. And then we have a validator that just is saying, this is a Flutter thing that says, that allows you to easily state that if you try to input a nonsensible quantity, then it'll have an error message. Oh, update jobs and storage is, I guess, not something we looked at, but is presumably calling stuff that we looked at. And then this seems to be maybe the overall widget. We have a column that is aligned at the start, and some rows, and some icons, and the add icon, so like the plus sign, I believe. And when it's pressed, you're going to show a modal bottom sheet that is scroll controlled, and the modal bottom sheet has a builder, I guess, which is the search bottom sheet. And when an item is selected, if the item is a playlist simple, we'll add a new row with the item. and the get jobs dot first. I don't know why dot first, but I guess maybe get jobs returns a tuple type of object, and we only want the first part of the first like the name of the playlist or something, or the ID. And then the search types is search type.playlist. It says add a playlist. So this seems to be some sort of search functionality. I don't know if show modal bottom sheet is something that he has implemented. Search bottom sheet. Using the bottom sheet. The bottom sheet has become a very popular place for quick interactions that do not require a full screen to do, such as signing up for a newsletter. This is some search function. I'm guessing you I'm guessing that it's you essentially provided a list, and as you type, it'll maybe choose from the list. Use the show modal bottom sheet function. So I can't find search bottom sheet. Maybe it's something here. Yeah. Seems to be something that he's implemented. So search bottom sheet extends stateful widget. It has on item selected the search types, whether to use playlist only in a title. And it's got some state, like the text editing controller. Which is a search controller, which is a text editing controller, and the Spotify service. And so I guess it's searching Spotify maybe. And a list of search results, which is dynamically typed, and whether it's loading. And so when we init state, we if we've set, I thought this said use playlist only, but I guess it's user playlist only. So if we are asking to use only user playlists, then we call fetch user playlists. Otherwise, we have this widgets binding thing. We'll add a post frame callback, and we'll add a listener. And if search controller text is not empty, we'll perform search. Okay, so I guess this is waiting until you've entered something in the search or searchy bar, and when you have, it'll call perform search. But it seems like the user playlist only thing doesn't do that. Presumably, because searching something as large as all of the Spotify public playlists is much more costly. So fetch user playlist will have this is loading thing set to true. That's like that's presumably a state that will display something like a spinny waiting icon. And it'll call Spotify service.get user playlists, and it will set state with the results. Then perform search. We'll get the query text, and if it's empty, then we'll set the search results to nothing. And we'll say we are loading, and we will try to call Spotify service.search with the query and setting some widget types, or rather, if the widget search types is populated, I guess we send them. And I'm guessing this question mark is like a ternary sort of operator, except binary. And so I'm guessing this means maybe if the search type is null, then we're searching for tracks, artists, and playlists. Let's start double question mark. It means if null, then take the following expression. Yeah, okay. So it's equivalent to like in ternary operator, it'd be like if widget.search types is non-null, I forget where it goes. Question mark, widget search types, and then followed by this or whatever. Okay. And then set state. So we attempt to do the search. Assuming it doesn't error out, we will set the state to the search results cast to a list. We're limiting it to 20. I was going to ask about that, but there it is. And we'll say that is loading as false. And we may have an error, in which case we're going to log it and set the search results to 0. And this is a builder for building items. Building list items. So these should be the things that go into the list. And we have title, subtitle. These are set to unknown. An image URL, whether it's an artist. And if it's a track, we have this kind of like dispatch logic. If it's a track, we do this stuff. If it's an artist, we do this stuff. We may have images and so on. There's some leading widget. I don't know what the leading widget is going to be. But if the image URL is non-empty and it's an artist, okay, here we go. Then the leading widget is a circle avatar with radius 25 with the background image is a network image of image URL. I'm guessing network image will take care of pulling that URL for you and caching it. Display images from the internet. Let me see if network image is something he did. Here we go. I don't know what painting.dart is. The painting library. I'm not sure if this is... I don't know if it's by the Flutter/Dart team or if it's a third party. There's paintings of libraries. That's always good. What is it? Pub.dev maybe? The Flutter painting library. I think it is made by the Flutter team. Okay, so I'm going to guess this is an official Flutter library. I'm not positive. And this is just some class that fetches the thing. The image will be cached, regardless of cache headers from the server. Cool. Okay. Maybe we looked at... Wait, I think that's what we were actively looking at. Okay, and then so we might handle some error. And then we have some container that's a child. We have the circle avatar. And then we have a child container, which is a box decoration, which is a circle. And I don't know, it is a child, but maybe it's a circle around the avatar. I don't know. And if we don't have an image, then we have some clipped rectangle with, I guess, a music note icon or something along those lines. We've got this image network from an image URL. Oh, I guess we only have the circle avatar if it's an image of the artist. Otherwise, it might be like an image of the album. I don't know what a song image would be. Maybe the song is also an image of the album the song was on or something. And the fallback is the icon's just a music note. And they return a list tile, so a thing from a list that goes in a visual widget display. And that's what we populate the widget with, I think. And here's the overall implementation. That's cool. There's lots of good stuff in here. I think that I'm just about ready to stop looking at this, except I want to see a little bit about what's going on with this. Oh, hang on. app core is just exporting stuff. I wanted to see what's going on with the Spotify API. I'm guessing there might be Spotify may have published an API in Dart or I guess it just has to be in Dart. It doesn't have to be in Flutter. But this also might be a custom implementation. So we have some API service that has an access token and a backend URL. And we've got this process jobs thing. It's going to return a future of a list between maps, a list of maps from strings to dynamic. I forget what the map from string to dynamic was, but essentially we have a list of them and it's an async thing, so it's going to return a future. Oh, so the results are each result, I guess, is a map from string to dynamic. So then we're going to iterate over the jobs. This is the function I think I was hoping I would see eventually. I totally forgot about. So for job and jobs, we're going to try some stuff and then catches down here. This is just going to add an error to the results. What are we going to try to do? We'll set the URL to the backend URL /process job. Backend, I guess, in this case is not the Spotify backend, it's the Spotkin backend. The response will be we're going to await http.post, the parsing of the URL. Can URI.parse not fail? I guess maybe if it fails, it'll just raise an exception, right? Okay, so headers with the bearer token, application JSON, etc. The body, we're going to JSON encode the job. There's a separate JSON for post request. So I guess the network format is maybe different from the format that we write to the disk. I'm guessing this is a custom method, unless there's a reason why this is in general. Let's try this again in the right repo. Yeah. I'm not sure how this differs from what's stored on disk, but it differs in some way. It might be a minor difference. And then we just set some timeout, so it'll fail after waiting for a minute. And if the response code is 200, then we've succeeded. We'll decode the response body, and that will add to the results the target playlist name, the success, and the response data, and we'll build up a list of results in that way. So that's the API service.dart. That's communicating, I guess, with the Spotkin API. And we have Spotify service. And we are importing package Spotify/Spotify.dart. So this seems to be a Dart library created by the Spotify people. We've got Flutter secure storage. I'm guessing that's where it's going to store the access token and the refresh token. Spotify is late binded. And the Spotify service configuration has a client ID, client secret, redirect URI, etc. And we'll check authentication. Calling ensure authenticated. Await Spotify.me.get. Me is presumably like the user that's calling. Initialize Spotify will retrieve credentials, probably from the secure storage. And if they're null, we have some error. And then if this succeeds, we'll call update Spotify instance, which will create the Spotify API object, passing in the credentials that we successfully fetched. And we've got this verify token thing. And I'm not sure why the client needs to verify, but we can exchange code for token. You give it a code and you get some sort of token back. I'm not sure what a code is. In this case, this seems to be just stuff about the Spotify API. I'm kind of curious what gets stored in secure storage. So Flutter secure storage seems to be a package. By Steen Backer. So I think probably on Android and iOS it uses the secure element. I'm not sure what goes on in the browser. Configure web version. It uses an experimental implementation using web crypto. Use at your own risk. What is web crypto? This feature is only available in secure contexts, HTTPS, in some or all supporting browsers. Warning, the Web Crypto API provides a number of low-level cryptographic primitives. Yeah, I'm not sure what that's about. May just be software-based crypto. It may have some support for like a hardware element. And secure storage seems to mainly be for the access token. And I think we saw elsewhere that it read the the secret API key from the shell. That's essentially passed in from the shell, I believe. Client secret. See if it's fetched anywhere. Yeah, okay, Spotify client secret. Or maybe it's in the config. I don't know. Yeah, yeah, I guess it's like persisted to JSON somehow, but not here. This is the public version. All right, I think that's it for Spotkin Flutter. That was cool. That was, I feel like I learned a lot about Flutter from looking at that code, and I'm really impressed with what he's been doing. So, do I have some plans to read services written in Golang? I'm just playing it by ear. Really, I wanted to look at Android apps. So, short answer is no. I don't have plans yet. I'm probably going to go week by week in terms of what I want to read. I wanted to look at Android apps because that's sort of where I'm. It'll be based on what I'm doing, like writing code. So right now I'm trying to figure out Android and Flutter. So that's why I wanted to look at some Android repos. Next week, I might be stuck on some problem, or maybe stuck or wanting to understand some problem better, et cetera, et cetera. So I normally don't go based on what the language is, but certainly we've looked at lots of Golang stuff, and we will do more in the future, but I don't have anything like on the horizon. All right. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend.